how do you look at your deals? Do they feel like a treasure hunt where you're going from clue to clue, when it's kind of like a black box mystery of step by step on your side, then a stall on their side, and then a request that leads you down the wrong road or gives you the wrong belief? This is what the larger complex sale feels like as a sales rep. And it feels that way because we view it incompletely. We view it from our perspective only. We don't view it from the client's perspective. And this week on the B2B show, I interviewed Andy Raskin, who's an expert at coming up with a narrative, a strategic narrative of explaining what you do. And I was like, well, why don't I do that for what I do? And I came up with this concept, and I'd like your feedback, of a deal architect. Now, the architect metaphor helps people understand that a deal has a structure. It has layers. It has both science and art, because architecture is both science and art. People have to live and work in these buildings. They're not just pieces of art to be adored. And a deal has this. It has science of why they're doing it, and then it has art of how to get it done. And it has layers, meaning that you have to build a strong foundation. You have to have electrical. You got to have heat and air conditioning. You have to have plumbing. It has to be durable. It has to be waterproof. And deals are a lot like this. And what we do as sales reps is we kind of react sometimes. We go through our process. We have happy ears. We think we understand all of it. And we don't test it. We don't build. We don't have a process. And deal architecture is so important because you got to know where you are, how to build it, what does the deal have to have as far as windows? Where do you put the windows? You don't put them next to the bathroom because people are taking showers. But you have to have enough windows for both light and feeling like people aren't boxed in. You have to have the rooms be a certain size, neither too big nor too small. You have to have both form and function, so it doesn't feel like a hotel. It feels like a home. And the windows are located where the view is the best. A deal has these elements too, whether we appreciate them or not. And all of us are really good, or anybody can be good at taking a deal, responding to a client's request, fulfilling a need. But there's only so many of those, and very few today. What we have to do is build deals that would not normally happen. And as I've said before, and I'm sure you feel, in the large complex sale, there's really three defaults. Status quo or do nothing, do it really small, and start over. This is what I hear all the time. And if you don't put together the building, the elements of the deal, that is what's going to happen. Now imagine, because I live in an area with this constant construction, both residential and commercial. And I'm always amazed that no one's ever holds out a plan, but yet it seems to come together. And I can almost tell you exactly how these buildings get built because there's so many around me that I see them all the time. The process that they go through. And you're always wondering, why does it take so long? It takes so long because it's done right. Because if you don't do it right, the building falls down. And in sales, we got to have the same mindset that we are building something with our client. And if you don't have the right foundation and structure, it falls down. So this is kind of a metaphor I'm working with as far as closing the complex sale. I titled it because that's what you want to achieve. I think if I titled it Deal Architect, people wouldn't want to understand what it is. But that's really what I'm trying to give, that what you leave with is a design of what a deal should look like. What are all the elements of it? How do you build it so it doesn't fall apart at the end of the quarter? and how do you close it? How do you keep it moving, and how do you have all the elements? Because if it doesn't have electrical, people flip the switch and it doesn't work. Doesn't have plumbing, you know what happens. It's a big mistake. So think deal architect. Let me know what you think about that. Today's interview is a little bit both strategic and tactical. It's focusing on, two, some people would call pseudosciences, but things that I have been studying for probably a long time, ever since I got into sales. I was always looking for the science of sales. And what I found is it's form and function. It's science and art. Because the scientists in sales never sold anything. The artists in sales, they could sell stuff, but it wasn't repeatable. So I wanted both. And this is based off of NLP, which is called Neuro-Linguistics Programming. And it all stemmed out of a hypnotist, Milton Erickson. And he became a master hypnotist. But and even hypnotism seems like a pseudoscience, but it's really communication. It's mastering communication using particular words and phrases to get the other person to focus on what you want to. And in this interview, you'll hear the guest using them very effectively. And he's a master practitioner of this. Now, I want to expose you to this. I'm not endorsing it as the only way of doing it. It is a skill. Communication is a skill. And using words is how we communicate. And connecting with another human being is what we do. And here are some very powerful techniques. I have used them. Now, the problem with words is they may not be our words. We may not be comfortable with them. We may have to practice and adapt them to our style. And I don't talk about these things that much on the podcast, but they are powerful. The challenge is it requires you to do a lot of practice because it's a skill and you have to practice it for it to become comfortable. Because this is why scripts are powerful when you write them, because it gets you out of your head and it's a little bit of practice. And using words and words that are unusual or sentences or questions that are unusual requires practice so that when you use them, you don't feel like a robot. So take everything with a grain of salt. I encourage you to experiment with this, but it is work and it's more tactics than strategy. But if you build these tactics into your strategy, it's a great combination. Let's get into the interview. I'd like to hear your feedback on this. Also, check out our friends over at CoVideo. One of the key modalities is our visual sense. And especially men are typically dominant visual people, so that if you are selling to guys, you need to be visual. And so we have these senses, and what video does is it pulls in visual and auditory, and then a kinesthetic sense. So you're touching on many different things. Because when you write words in a text email, we don't really know how they're reacting to those words. Because you have to remember, people do not think, they react. So how do you get the reaction that you want? We're diving into this in this interview today. It might be a little heavy. It might be one of those ones that you have to listen to a couple of times. And these are skills that you will have to develop. Let's get into the interview. I'll sum it up at the end and give you an update on the courses. Here we go. Hey, Paul, welcome to the show. As a way of getting started, tell us about yourself.
Good morning. Well, the first thing I want to tell you about myself is I'm a huge fan of your LinkedIn videos. I love them. They are right to the point and they're funny, and I just am a fan. So I'll get over the fanboy stuff in 10 seconds. So I am a master practitioner and trainer of neurolinguistic programming. For those of you who don't know what that is, my opinion is it's the study of how language structures consciousness, shapes decisions, and drives behavior. And my whole orientation as a hypnotist, as a matter of fact, I used to be a dating coach, is about how do we create the states of consciousness in our prospects through which they're far more likely to receive our traditional sales process. So the question I teach my students is, before you present your sales plan or whatever it is, first stop and think, what states do I want my prospects in? How do I create states of fascination, of a desire to follow me, of a willingness to believe, of unbreakable rapport? And how can I do it quickly and systematically? So that's me, and I've been a student of the human mind and language since I can remember.
And what made you curious about this?
Well, I have an interesting and unique and unusual story. I was someone who could not get a date all the way into my mid-20s, and I searched for answers to this and couldn't find it. I just tried therapy, I tried prayer, and then I discovered NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and it took me about 2 years to get over my horrible lack of communication skills, my terrifically bad self-esteem. And I thought, hey, you know what? I'm tired of working as a paralegal and a part-time real estate salesperson. I could teach other guys how to do this. So I began to be a dating coach. I actually built a multi-million-dollar empire doing that. And then over time, what happened, Brian, if I can give a tiny bit of the history, is I started to get emails from students saying, you know what, Paul, I've been using your stuff for sales and I'm crushing it. I'm like doubling what I used to do. So I spent about 2 or 3 years mapping it over into selling, and then started getting private clients here and there. And it really does map over. Essentially, it's sales like a date, or to be really out there, it's like a seduction.
Well, it's talking to a stranger, right? And even all the stuff, the pickup stuff is based off NLP.
Well, you've got to qualify. First of all, you got to do your outreach, your cold calling, so to speak. You've got to qualify or disqualify your prospects. You have to get rapport, and then you have to get them excited about the idea. Then you have to do, forgive me, the close, and then you have to handle objections, and also put up with a lot of no. There's a lot of no.
And I think it also gets to the core of kind of the statement that I have, is that people don't think, they react. And
yes.
And a lot of people sell at the thinking stage, at what I call the human stage instead of the mammal stage.
Well, I would say I think that's a brilliant way to look at it. One way I would look at it in a complimentary way is people make their decisions largely on the unconscious or subconscious level. And then they give rationalizations for why they did it. It's fundamentally a hypnotic process. So as a hypnotist, someone who's trained to do hypnosis, if I put you in trance and said, when I say the word watermelon, you're just going to talk in your shoe like it's a telephone, and you accepted that suggestion and you started to do the behavior, I'd say, why are you talking into your shoe? And you would come up with an excuse. You'd say, I don't know, I just felt like being a kid and playing and pretending it was a telephone. So we're not going to go that far deeply, but I think when we sell, we're appealing to the unconscious or subconscious level of our prospect. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't be proud of what we do, and it's not to say that we shouldn't be in service. But to me, if all you think about is being in service, you're going to lose leadership. To me, selling is about service times suggestion. The effective use of suggestion will take any sales process that's working for you and 2x it or 3x it.
Yeah. And a lot of people today are saying that rapport isn't necessary.
I think rapport is overrated. I think what's far more important is a response frame of mind. How do we get the prospect responsive to us? Now, rapport may or may not be necessary, but if that's the first thing you aim at, then you're in trouble. I really think rapport is overrated and it's ill-defined. And there are times, as you know, I watch you. I know you that this is your way of thinking. There are times when you have to break rapport and get confrontational.
Yeah. And that's not necessarily bad.
No.
You got to kind of start where the other person is.
Yes, correct. You can't move a person from where they're not. You have to move them from where they are. And you said something brilliant. You said people come from reaction. I want to build on that point, because one of the things in NLP and in hypnosis is the idea of a pattern interrupt. that people respond and think in fixed patterns. If you can interrupt that pattern, they become suggestible and leadable. I first learned this doing dating coaching, if I can tell a brief story.
Go ahead.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
So I had a client who paid me a tidy sum of cash to take him out, and we were at a restaurant with a patio area, and he was just I felt so embarrassed and humiliated for this guy. He was just striking out horribly. At the end of the evening, about 1 a.m, because I couldn't stand watching him just get shredded, we're waiting for a cab, and I looked over, I said, oh, there's a young lady waiting for her cab. And it went in the wrong way for some reason. She proceeded to swear at me like a sailor drunk on 10 bottles of whiskey. He got very angry. The veins on his neck bulged out. He went to give her a piece of his mind. I stopped him. I said, no. She can come from wherever she likes. We decide where we come from. Look at her. She's someone's daughter. She's someone's sister. She's someone's best friend. Somewhere she's deeply loved. Now, in that moment, her expected pattern was for me to yell at her or to beg for her forgiveness. I broke her expectations. She came over, threw her arms around me, wept, and said, I'm so sorry. That was the most beautiful thing. I love you. People have been pigs to me all night long. Men have been pigs. Thank you. What's your name? And I extended my hand. I said, Mr. Wonderful, here's our cab, and off we went. Yeah. But the point of the story is I interrupted her expected pattern. She expected me to beg or to attack back, and I broke her pattern with just 2 sentences.
Yeah.
Now, if you can take someone who's absolutely enraged, and in a matter of, it was about 30 seconds of dialogue, turn her into someone who loves you. You can take a prospect who doesn't trust you or who's objecting and turn them around into someone who's in a state where they want to buy, if you can stay neutral. Because what I didn't do there is get all empathetic and cry along with her. I would have lost leadership. You have to find a balance between feeling enough compassion. I don't believe in empathy or sympathy. If you have empathy, you'll feel their anger. You'll feel their hesitation. If you have sympathy, you'll buy their story. But if you have compassion, you can say, okay, I see. They're just someone who needs to get more information to see it's a good decision. It's my job to lead them from a calm, neutral place.
I like that word compassion, because I think what's missing in sales today is this outward mindset, the ability to think like the other person. Not just feel, which is empathy, but the compassion for what they're going through.
Yes, without buying into their story,
right.
and still being able to interrupt their pattern. I love objections. One of my favorite things to teach is to teach how to handle objections. I have a hypnotic way to deal with it. This is not to say the traditional ways of dealing with it don't work. They do. Stick with your sales process. Just add this in. For example, if you get the objection, I need more time to think it over. We always hear this, and I'm sure you'll recognize that the big mistake is, okay, here's my card. That's like saying to someone who you asked for a date, okay, give me your number and I'll call you. Right, sure. So I like to interrupt the pattern. If someone says, I need more time to think it over, I say, I understand. Can I ask you a question? Have you ever had the experience of taking a long time to think something over and it still turned out to be a bad decision? Now, in that moment, there's like a moment of shock, because that's a universal experience. And I'll say, maybe it's not about time, but about the clarity you need to recognize you really can move forward today. So thinking about it like that, what concerns do we need to clear up? So it's a different approach. It's taking the traditional stuff, which is say, I understand it seems like we're not on the same page yet. Can you tell me what's getting in the way of your moving forward today? That's great, but I would rather put them in a suggestive state first by breaking their pattern.
Because they probably don't know. They haven't internalized it, cooked it up.
No,
they're like,
no, they're confused.
Yeah.
I think the number two things that really are getting in our way as salespeople, and I think the biggest problem is your prospect is overwhelmed by all this input coming in, and more importantly, they just don't know how to focus. They're checked out.
Yeah.
They're completely checked out. Even if they start out interested, they have the attention span of goldfish.
Right.
I'm sure you remember when YouTube first came on and the ads were 2 minutes long.
Yep.
And now they're 15 seconds. And we have these things. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb for a couple hours to get work done, or I turn it off. We have instant message. We have Facebook. We have Tinder. I don't know anything about Tinder.
You don't need to.
Okay. No, look at me. So you get my point. And so we need to create those states of focus. And also, this is something I think the biggest problem is not that they don't trust you. They don't trust their own ability to make a good decision, unless they're very sophisticated. If you're doing business to business and you're dealing with a very sophisticated CEO, that's a different story. But a lot of prospects just don't trust their ability to make good decisions because they've been hammered with a lot of setbacks about what is a good decision. I remember the 2008 crash very well. And the old phrase, you can take it to the bank. Well, my bank was Washington Mutual. I don't know where are you located?
In the DC area.
Did you have Washington Mutual Bank out there?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I remember Washington Mutual was my bank, and then one weekend the signs were down, and the next Monday it was Chase Bank. And I'm thinking, what the heck is going on? So even more now during COVID, this is a black swan event. Now people really don't trust what's a good decision because everything has crumbled around them.
And that's it. The natural thing is to think about it because people think time will help them make a decision. But
no, I don't think that's the case.
Right, because they still have to raise the issues internally with themselves. It's like to think through what they want to do. Now how? So you did the dating thing. Now you're moving it to sales?
Yeah, I've been moving into sales for quite some time, but I did sales when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I sold candy bars for my local school, and even then I understood the idea of pattern interrupts because the first thing I did when they opened the door is, hi, I'm here to sell you something, which is a complete interruption. Usually it's make some small talk. They weren't expecting that. I'd hold up the candy bar. I'd say, it tastes great, and you'll feel really good because you know you're supporting the school just like the kind of person you really know you are. And that, like, who the hell is this kid? Then I sold real estate, was not particularly good at it. And then I got into selling the dating coaching. I made lots of money doing that. Lots of money. I didn't make necessarily the best business decisions, but that's another skill set.
But the sales side, what do you see people doing wrong?
Number one thing is they're over-focusing on facts, data, figures, and they're not thinking about what states of consciousness do you want your prospects in, and what states of consciousness do you want to be in. I've looked at what's the difference between someone who's really good, and my preference, and quite frankly, if you're listening to this, I work with people who are already stars and want to become superstars. And the difference between a star and a superstar is the superstar, the champion, understands that they're interested in the sale, but they're invested in their skills. So one of the other big mistakes is that salespeople aren't in the right frame of mind. They bought into a lot of ideas about what the right frame of mind is and what it means to be confident as a salesperson. I learned this teaching guys who are completely clueless and helping them get up a learning curve. And I think a lot of what's taught about confidence is just ill-defined. Everyone says you need to be confident. Well, that's implying that confidence is like a personality trait or a fluid that you pour into your head instead of a practice that you do. And you also have to have a really good learning strategy. This is also something I've never seen taught in any sales training. But I had to develop it teaching these guys. I had to teach them how to teach themselves going up the learning curve, how to learn from every mistake. I am tired of hearing learn from your mistakes, but no one tells you how. No one gives you a process.
So what should the process be?
First of all, you have to cultivate a state of consciousness where you can look at what you've done without being invested in it. Okay. I teach all of my students to develop a meditation practice. It doesn't have to be intense. We're not trying to reach nirvana. We're just trying to reach a state of detachment where you can look at what you've done from a detached place where you're no longer looking at your behavior through your patterns of thinking, but you can look at your patterns of thinking and have a clear look at your behavior. This requires cultivating that state of what I call witness consciousness. Now, these are bat bleep crazy ideas. I don't want to swear on your show. The idea of success at sales being about cultivating consciousness, expanding your consciousness and expanding the consciousness of your prospects is a crazy idea. It's outside the traditional paradigm. But I think it's only when you shatter the traditional paradigm that you begin to see results that are far beyond what you think you could have enjoyed.
Well, that's it, because learning what everyone does is justify what they did instead of learning from it.
Now, I want to be clear. That's absolutely true, and not but. I'm not putting down traditional sales trainings. You still have to do all the rest of it. Of course, you need to prospect. You need to qualify by asking the right questions. I like selling through asking the right questions. That's all true. I'm simply saying when you layer in recognizing designing states of consciousness for yourself and your prospects, it's going to be a multiplier effect.
Yeah.
It's going to multiply the power of what you do. And I think it's missing. No one talks about creating states of consciousness. It's just my perspective as a hypnotist and someone who used this stuff to set myself free and work with the most clueless people you can imagine and people who are suffering.
Well, I mean, I think that state management's really important, because if you're in a weak state, both physically and mentally, it comes through. What are your feelings on the flow state and how to apply that?
I think the flow state, again, is you can't get there unless you learn detachment. You have to be detached from the outcome. You just have to be process-oriented. Rather, I like this idea. I don't know if you're old enough to remember bifocals. These are reading glasses, but bifocals.
No, I'm way too young.
They had. Okay, well, sorry about that. The bifocals were, well, you look like you could be too young. I don't know. You're in good shape. You look like you take good care of yourself, sir. But bifocals, for those who don't know, were glasses, and the bottom half, I believe, was used to read close up, and the top half is used to see far away. And I think if you really want to stay motivated and get in the right state of mind, you need to have the ability to look at the next step right in front of you, but you also have to have the ability to look at the vision that's pulling you forward. And learning to get that balance between the two is something that my claim to fame is that I can uniquely teach people how to do. There's no one else who knows how to create that. And again, I want to emphasize one more time, I'm not putting down traditional sales processes. You have to do a lot of what's taught. I just think some of it no longer works as well, and a lot of it is archaic.
Yeah. And what was the motivation for the book?
The motivation for the book is I've been so fascinated by the power of language to influence. And I tried multiple times, to be transparent, since 2005 to really perfect this kind of system. And just around 2017, I thought, okay, I've got it. I've done enough iterations. I beta tested it with enough clients. This is a good introduction to my work. And then also, to be transparent, up until COVID, I had a budding speaking career, and this is a great calling card. When you've got a book, it gives you serious gravitas when you approach event planners, and also when you're on stage. Being an author is a pretty high status thing, and it's also good for my dating life. when they say, what do you do? Well, I'm an author, no big deal. An author.
And let's get into the words. I mean, do you see people using the wrong words, or they should be using more of the senses-based words that NLP teaches, like find the modality, the dominant one, and then work?
I have found that finding the modality can work. And for those of you who don't know, NLP teaches visual, auditory, kinesthetic, that some people primarily process through visual words, some people process through auditory, some people process through kinesthetic. I found that's pretty clunky, and it works in the seminar room, but then you have to focus on all these things. Right. I prefer to use words in a way that create subconscious states. So I'll give you an example. Here's a crazy idea. What if you could create trust and rapport in the first two sentences of any meeting, any presentation, any pitch? So there are what I call implied relationship words. They are share, we, invite, explore. So before presenting a marketing plan, most people would say, well, before I show you this marketing plan, I just want to tell you, please ask any questions that come up. That is sort of framing it as you're doing something to someone.
Right.
I would say before we explore this marketing plan together, now let's stop right there. We explore together. What is that implying? We explore together.
We're doing it together.
It's implying a relationship. We're doing something together. Before we explore this together, I just want to say, please feel free to share the questions, not ask the questions, but share the questions. What's the difference between the subtle word share and the subtle word and the word ask?
Well, ask puts the onus on them. Share means we're in this together, that we're
Exactly. We don't share things with people that we don't
like or
trust. And then I said, please, I just want to invite you. Do we extend invitations to people who we don't trust, who we don't? And an invitation also implies you're going to give them something valuable. So in the space of one sentence, we're creating rapport, we're creating trust, and even more subtly, we're creating the perception that we're the ones offering them something of value. When we say invite and share, we share something of value. When you extend an invitation, it means you're about to give a gift. So there's a lot going on there.
And I've noticed that you ask permission before you ask a question. You know, can I ask you a question? Now, is that important, or is that?
I don't always do that. I do that when I'm because granting permission means on an unconscious level. First of all, I'm showing them respect, and when they grant permission, it's more something that they're not quite committing to accepting, but something where they're going to drop their resistance to accepting.
So what do you see as the stage? Is it rapport, then trust?
I think it's, I think it would be deep focus and a sense of even willingness to be led, establishing that you're a leader by the way you use language in a clever way, because for every leader, there must be a
follower.
Exactly. So what's even better than getting rapport and trust is creating the unconscious perception that they really want to follow you. Wow, that's really big. If you can create in your prospect the idea that they don't just trust you and they're not just fascinated by what you have to say, but they're actually a follower of yours, now you enroll them in a way better power dynamic throughout the whole sales process. I know this is bat bleep crazy stuff. I don't know, but then again, maybe it makes sense to you.
No, it's good. It's great stuff. What I've always found the challenge with teaching this is like, it's hard for people to change the words they use.
I have found it to be pretty significantly easy once you get them. Yes, once you get them motivated, and once you explain it in a way that's fascinating and humorous, and you use metaphor. Yeah. If you use metaphor to teach, then it makes it more easy for them to understand. Like the metaphor of an iceberg. Well, the mind isn't really an iceberg. That's just a metaphor. And the metaphor, it's like asking for a date or dating. People instantly see, oh yeah, you're right, I get it. So I use a lot of metaphor when I teach. Metaphor is a bridge from one way of understanding over into a new way of understanding, and it bypasses conscious resistance. Again, I'm a hypnotist. I'm always looking to bypass the conscious mind as much as possible.
Right, because the conscious mind is slower. It's a slave to the unconscious mind, regardless of what people.
Right. In any battle between the conscious and the unconscious mind is going to win. Hands down, that's the end of it. Every time. Yeah. Every time. So knowing that that's a fact, we may as well know how to systematically use that.
And what words does the unconscious mind, is it emotional words?
It can be words that evoke emotion, but I like to use what I call, I'm just going to say it, trance phrases. Like I would say something, as we're sharing this together, I don't know at what spot you might find yourself growing more and more interested in what it is we're sharing. But as that's taking place, I just invite you to recognize that maybe you can move forward today. So what does it mean to find yourself doing something, Brian? You ever just find yourself reaching in the refrigerator and think, what am I doing? I don't remember walking here. Do you ever just find yourself falling in love and then find yourself falling out of love and you think, what the heck was I thinking? Those kind of words imply a process that's going to take place on the unconscious level. There's no need to resist, and there's no possibility of resistance. So they're little subtle phrases I stick in there to create those hypnotic states of receptibility.
Kind of that Ericksonian hypnotized.
It's all based on the work of Milton Erickson. I think he was the grandfather of NLP, and he's the grandfather of NLP and the great grandfather of my work. Milton Erickson's daughter, they asked her about one of them, which one? She said, my father would be horrified.
Well, I mean, because the NLP stuff, I think so many authors try and make it too scientific.
They make it too complex. And also what works, here's something I want to point out. To those of you who use NLP, I love NLP. I'm madly in love with it. And a lot of NLP only works in the seminar room. People self-select. They're raising their hands. They're paying all that money. They're traveling. They're taking time off work. And they're effectively saying, I want this to work on me. But when you're out there in the mean, brutal streets, the brutal truth about selling, people aren't interested in that stuff. They're not raising their hands. No. So what works I had the street fight NLP. I had to learn what's going to work when it comes. You think sales is brutal? Try dating. I had to learn what worked in the brutal world of dating, and also teaching guys who are really broken. I had to go down there and fist fight with their unconscious minds to get them to change. There was no time for theory and stuff that only worked in the seminar room. It had to work in the streets.
And how do you get over? Is it just practice? Because I noticed the same thing. Because in the seminar room, everything works because it's a contained petri dish. You go out into the real world, randomness.
It's dealing with chaos. Exactly. People have the vending machine theory of sales. You put in your quarter of preparing, your quarter of rapport, your quarter of prospecting, your quarter of closing, and push the button, and out comes the commission check. When in reality, sales can be chaotic. Anything can make that deal fall through. And people are chaotic. Recognizing chaos is a huge part of realistic confidence.
And what do you hope people get out of the book?
I hope people get a completely new insight, first and foremost, of what it means to sell. To have a completely new way of looking at the process. And also, quite frankly, I hope they fall in love with language the way I have. And finally, it's a way of getting them a taste of what I can do for them, and that they'll find yourself as you listen, recognizing you want to contact me for more.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Well, you're trained.
I know.
You're trained.
It was still pretty smooth.
I know. I've been doing this 30 years.
Cool. And how can people get in touch with you?
Well, I have a Facebook group, and when you join, I do Facebook live streams every week, and I'm also put videos in there and answer questions. It's a very active group, and we're growing, so it's a way to continue to learn from me practical tools as well as theory for free. It's easy. Go to speakerpaulross.com. That's speakerpaulross.com/group, and you'll be immediately taken to the group. You just have to answer 3 questions, easy questions, and you'll be a member, and you'll get to learn from me for free on a consistent basis. And a lot of people just are making really good money and improving their sales just by watching the free live streams.
Did you notice what he was doing? Some of those questions and framing and how he handled the objection. That was, it's very powerful. And does it work every time? Nothing does with people. But is it worth learning? I think it's worth learning, because how often do we hit something that's completely brand new in our conversations with people? What we need to do is prevent things like objections, next steps, stalls, because it's so much easier to prevent them. But you can't prevent everything. So when you do hear things, you need to be able to be prepared for them. And you're probably not going to do very well if it surprises you. You're not going to do very well if it just bounces up onto you. So I think check out his book. I would investigate neuro-linguistics programming. I would treat it more like a hobby at first, because it's great verbal skills. And if you're in the simple sale, it's much more powerful. But even in the complex sale, you do have conversations, and how to handle them really well is powerful. But don't think of it as a gimmick. Think of it as a skill, something that you start slow and you build up. Too many people will read the book and just put it away. No, you got to really dog-ear the book and develop each one of those skills. But make sure you have the right architecture for your deals. If your deals are big, meaning multiple people, large dollar amount, time gaps in between conversations and meetings, then you really need to think through the process. Because the process, if you keep the plan moving, will trump communication skills. Because you got momentum, direction, and control. And I've seen people who have no charm or personality, but keep the process moving, win huge deals. Now, if you're in the courses already, make sure you're checking out the office hours. We had a great one yesterday. Lots of Q&A, lots of discussion, mindset, process, shortcuts, hacks, examples, and you get to hear other people, because prospecting can be overwhelming, and it is. But most of us have the wrong mindset when we look at it. What you need to do is, once you have the right mindset, it becomes a habit. And once it becomes a habit, you can become better and better at it. Too many of us are flailing around, and we look at our calendar and we've got, one new meeting this week? What we need is 10, 20 new meetings this week. What we need to do is warm up our network so we have constant conversations with people, that we are engaged with our target market, not in service, but in conversations, talking to people, engaging them, learning about where they are. Because most of what we sell is time-based, meaning that it has to be the right time. They have to be warmed up. They have to be aware. There has to be curiosity and interest. That does not happen in a single cold call, especially if the deal is bigger. They have to become aware of it. They have to understand, how is it different? And most of them are going to try and fit it into how they view the world right now. That's called confirmation bias. And when I do a post on LinkedIn, people will convert and contort my point just so it fits into their confirmation bias. And I'll be like, that's not the point at all. All you're trying to do is rephrase my point so that it fits into your view of the world. And what I'm trying to do is get you to think of the world a little different. And some people just will refuse to and completely miss the point just so they're comfortable that they think they understand the world the way it is. None of us do. We are all incomplete. We do not have the mental capacity to understand the whole world. We need to feel comfortable that we do, that we have a handle on it, but we don't. And once you have that confirmation bias and you stick with it and you don't expand from it, that's called Dunbar's Law. You stop at the B player level and you never get to the A player level, because the A player has to constantly look for, what do I not have? How is my view, my design, my architecture incomplete? Because it always is. What am I not anticipating? What am I not seeing? And once you get to that level, that's that curiosity and interest and seeing the whole picture, that you will get to the next level. If you stay in the comfy level, you'll never see it. Okay, so make sure you check out this week's episode of the B2B Revenue Leadership Show. Also, the Sales Questions, Brutally Honest Answers podcast. Check out the YouTube channel if you like videos. I keep them all up there. I never delete them. iTunes only keeps the last 200 of the podcasts, or last 300. So make sure you download them all if you want to keep them, because they disappear, because I'm putting out such great stuff. So 300 is like, 3 years? Is that true? Yeah, about 3 years. But there's 11 years of podcasting out there. And you can kind of see the evolution of me as a rep. and the guess and the peeling back of the onion of what makes a great salesperson. And it's not a 2-day workshop. It's a lifestyle, it's a skill set, it's a performance. And we have to engage with that and practice it and evolve. So go to b2brevenue.com, check out the courses. You can schedule a 15-minute call with me. Please show up. Please self-qualify by listening to the podcast, watching the YouTube channels to see if it matches your sale and what works for you. And you like my style and working with me, because that's who it is. And the outcome of the course is start the conversation, get the meeting. You will have the ability to start conversations and get meetings with people you never were able to before. You'll have the mindset of a master prospector and the ability to do it every day and even outsource it and automate it with technology. Closing the complex sale, you become that deal architect. You'll understand the deal that you're building instead of reacting to it, instead of looking at it like a black box, not knowing what's going on in there, guys. Tell me, give me an update, follow up with me, check in. No, you'll understand where it is and where you need to take it and increase your likelihood of closing it. We'll see you next time.